Imagine packing your entire life into a U-Haul, driving across the country, and thinking you'd finally escape the chaos of your relationship, only to wake up one morning and find your ex sleeping in her car outside your apartment. That's exactly what happened to me. She asked for space, I left without a word, and somehow she still tracked me down. And what unfolded next was stranger, more humiliating, and way more dramatic than anything I ever expected. I was 28, working one of those government jobs people imagine is glamorous but really isn't. Officially, I was part of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. In reality, I spent more time buried in paperwork and counting dead fish than swimming with dolphins. It wasn't exciting, but it was stable, and in my field, jobs like mine were rare. You don't let go of one once you've got it. Anna was my girlfriend. 27, funny, spontaneous, but also the most indecisive person I had ever met. In 4 years, she had changed her college major twice, switched jobs more times than I could count, and could turn ordering lunch into a 3-hour crisis. At first, I thought her indecision was quirky, something to smile about. But when you're trying to plan a life together, constant hesitation stops being cute. Still, I loved her. We'd been together 4 years, living in a tiny Halifax apartment for nearly a year. And despite all her second-guessing, I was certain about one thing: I wanted to marry her. I had already bought the ring. For weeks, it sat in my jacket pocket, waiting for the perfect moment. She had no idea. I thought I was about to take the biggest step of my life with her, but I had no clue that everything was about to collapse. It started small. She grew quiet whenever I brought up renewing the lease. If I mentioned taking a trip together, she'd dodge the topic. And sometimes, she'd just look at me, like she was trying to solve some impossible math equation in her head. That was when I first felt it. Something had shifted. Then came the conversation that flipped everything. She sat me down, avoided eye contact, and told me she needed space. Not a breakup, just a break. She said she wanted to figure out what she really wanted in life. It was vague, and it left me sitting there wondering if I was supposed to just wait, like a puppy left at the door, but instead of waiting, I did something impulsive. My boss had mentioned a transfer opening at our Victoria office, a promotion, better pay, and actual field work instead of endless forms. The catch? The position had to be filled immediately. That night, I told him I was in. Within a week, it was official that I didn't explain much to Anna, just sent a text saying I was taking the opportunity and that she now had all the space she wanted. I didn't tell her where I was going. 2 weeks later, I had sold most of my furniture, packed up everything I owned into a U-Haul, and left Halifax behind. The trip was a disaster. The truck broke down in the middle of nowhere. I spent 2 nights in a motel that reeked of cigarette smoke, and when I finally got to Victoria, the apartment I rented came with a closet full of mannequin heads left by the previous tenant. But even with all that, I felt free. For the first time in months, I could breathe. For a while, life in Victoria was better than I imagined. I was finally doing real conservation work, kelp forests, field projects, the kind of hands-on stuff I'd dreamed about. My stress dropped, I made new friends, even started rock climbing. 3 months in, it felt like I had outrun all the mess I left behind, and then my best friend Dan blew it all up. Back in Halifax, he ran into Anna. In a moment of pure stupidity, or maybe guilt, he told her everything. Not just that I had thought about proposing, but that I had already bought the ring. He also slipped up and told her where I had moved. The next day, I got a panicked call from Dan. He said Anna reacted like her world had collapsed. And just like that, the secret I had guarded so carefully became the spark that reignited everything I was trying to leave behind. It didn't take long before the call started. First, her mother, yes, the same woman who once told me I wasn't ambitious enough for her daughter. She was suddenly begging me to give Anna a chance, telling me Anna had quit her job and was planning to move across the country to win me back. I told her no. Anna made her choice, and I had made mine. But my refusal didn't stop anything. A few days later, Anna showed up in Victoria. She didn't call first, didn't ask. I found out when she appeared outside my workplace, in tears, begging my supervisor for my schedule. Security had to escort her out. My coworkers didn't know what to say. Some of them laughed, like I was stuck in the middle of a bad romantic comedy. But for me, it was mortifying, and that was only the beginning. I thought maybe that first scene at work was the worst of it. I was wrong. A couple of days later, I came home and found her sitting on the front steps of my apartment building, red-eyed, with 2 suitcases at her feet. She had somehow tracked down my address, probably through Dan, who apparently couldn't keep his mouth shut about anything. When I tried to walk past her, she stood up like we were about to have some grand reunion. I told her flat out that we had nothing to discuss and went inside. She spent the entire night sitting there. The next morning, my building manager pulled me aside. He wasn't happy. Having someone camped outside with luggage, crying all night, wasn't exactly the image they wanted for tenants. It was embarrassing. But Anna didn't stop there. She started showing up in places she knew I'd be, outside the office, near the climbing gym, waiting by the grocery store. My coworkers whispered, my neighbors started asking questions, and even my boss couldn't resist joking about my persistent visitor. What was supposed to be a clean break had turned into a public spectacle. And then it crossed into something even stranger. She started holding signs, actual handmade signs. One of them just said, "I'm sorry." Another? She made out of kelp. Yes, seaweed. She walked past my office window holding it up like this was some kind of rom-com finale. My supervisor raised his eyebrows and muttered that we needed to talk about my personal situation. The whispers, the pity, the stares, it was everywhere. Suddenly, it didn't feel like I had escaped anymore. It felt like I was being followed by a ghost that refused to let go. But things weren't even close to hitting rock bottom yet. It didn't take long before her situation started collapsing in on itself. The hostel she was staying at kicked her out once the time limit expired, and instead of going home, she started living out of her car. Every time I looked out my window, I'd see it parked across the street. My elderly neighbor even started bringing her sandwiches because she looked so heartbroken and thin. I tried telling her this wasn't a movie, but she just patted my arm and muttered something in Mandarin that I'm pretty sure translated to, "You're heartless." The whole thing became a running joke at work. My supervisor asked if I needed time off to sort out my persistent visitor. Right on cue, Anna walked by holding another sign, this one dripping wet with actual kelp. I wanted the ground to swallow me. Then it got worse. Living in a car, eating gas station food, rotating parking spots, it caught up to her. She got sick. Badly sick. And when she landed in the emergency room, guess who the hospital called? Not her parents. Not her friends. Me. Because I was still listed as her emergency contact. So there I was, sitting in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights, wondering if I was a terrible person for even considering leaving. When I saw her though, she didn't look like the manipulative, dramatic version of herself I'd been dealing with. She looked exhausted, fragile, and genuinely relieved to see someone familiar. The doctors said she was dehydrated, weak, and needed proper rest, not car camping in October rain. She cried again, softer this time, like she was just grateful I hadn't abandoned her completely. But instead of giving her what she wanted, I called her parents. I wasn't going to shoulder her collapse. The next day, her father flew in. That was when I learned the truth. She had quit her job without notice, burned through her savings just to get here, and had been lying to her family about having a place to stay. Then he told me something that stuck: she'd been in therapy, and her therapist had warned her not to follow me. She ignored it anyway. I didn't know whether to feel sympathy or fury. Was she really trying to change, or was this just another layer of manipulation dressed up as personal growth? Either way, her collapse dragged me right back into the mess I'd tried so hard to escape. I thought once her dad came, maybe she'd finally go back home. But instead, she dug herself in deeper. She didn't just stay in Victoria, she embedded herself right into my work. She somehow landed a volunteer spot at the aquarium, the exact aquarium that partners with my department. And not just in the background. She was directly tied to the kelp restoration project I had been leading for months. The first time I walked into a meeting and saw her 3 seats down from me, notebook in hand, pretending like we were complete strangers, I nearly laughed out loud. Except no one else knew the history. To them, she was just this enthusiastic new volunteer. To me, she was a walking time bomb. The whole meeting was surreal. She took notes with laser focus, like she was trying to solve a national crisis. My supervisor kept glancing between us like he was watching a tennis match, and the director of the aquarium actually praised her for her fresh perspective. I wanted to crawl under the table. Afterward, she tried to corner me by the jellyfish tanks. I dodged, slipping into the gift shop and pretending to study stuffed sea otters until she gave up. For the next few weeks, every professional event felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. Meanwhile, my personal life wasn't safe either. I had started dating someone from my climbing gym, a smart, direct woman who actually seemed interested in building something real. But try explaining why your ex is standing 20 feet away, watching you like some tragic shadow. She was cool about it at first, even joked that it reminded her of her own crazy ex. But eventually, I could tell it was too much. No one signs up for a relationship that comes with a spectator. Everywhere I went, work, home, even dates, she was there. Not screaming, not begging, just present. Like she was building a life in my orbit whether I wanted her there or not. And then came the letter. I didn't ask for it, but her dad pressed a folded envelope into my hands before flying back to Halifax. "At least read it," he said. For days, I avoided it. The last thing I wanted was another window into her chaos. But one night, curiosity won.it wasn't short. 7 handwritten pages. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, her words actually made sense. She admitted the break hadn't been about personal growth or some vague quest for clarity. It was fear. She overheard me once talking to my mom about marriage and kids, and instead of feeling excited, she panicked. She said she had a pattern, sabotaging good things whenever they got too real. That's why she'd stalled on jobs, majors, commitments. And when our future started looking solid, she froze. She confessed that when Dan told her about the ring, it wasn't just shock that I'd been planning to propose. It was realizing that I had been building a future she was too scared to even discuss. She called herself a coward. Said she'd walked away, not because she didn't love me, but because she didn't think she deserved someone who wanted that kind of stability with her. And then she addressed everything else: the move, the stalking, the humiliation. She wrote that she hadn't come to Victoria expecting me to take her back. She came because she needed to prove to herself that she could make a decision and stick to it, for once in her life. That following me, as reckless as it was her way of forcing herself to stop running. The letter ended with an apology, not just for hurting me, but for twisting my life into this circus. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for another chance. She just wanted me to know she finally understood what she had thrown away. Reading it felt like being punched in the gut and hugged at the same time. But here's what I realized: understanding someone's reasons doesn't erase the damage. Yes, she was scared. Yes, she might have been trying to grow. But the fact remained, she had chosen to step back when things got serious. And then she had chosen to follow me across the country, turning both of our lives upside down. Good intentions don't undo bad choices. After reading the letter, I knew I couldn't just ignore her forever. I didn't owe her reconciliation, but I did owe myself closure. So I agreed to meet her once, neutral ground, the Botanical Gardens. Public, calm, and far enough from my apartment that she couldn't just linger afterward. When she arrived, I braced for tears, begging, maybe another dramatic scene. But that wasn't what happened. She looked collected. Tired, but steady. We sat on a bench surrounded by trees, and for the first time in months, we just talked. Not as a couple, not as enemies, just as two people who had once mattered to each other. She thanked me for being there when she ended up in the hospital. She even complimented my kelp project, like she'd been following my work out of genuine interest, not just obsession. And then she said something that surprised me. "I know you're not going to give me another chance, and I don't expect one. Following you here wasn't about getting you back. It was about proving to myself I could make a hard decision and stay with it. For once, I didn't run." She told me she'd started therapy again in Victoria. That the volunteer work wasn't about staying close to me, it was about forcing herself to build a life in a place where she had no safety net. She said she wanted to see if she could become someone different, someone who didn't collapse whenever commitment appeared. When we finally stood up to leave, she asked about the engagement ring. I told her I still had it but hadn't decided what to do. She suggested I sell it, not for her, but because keeping it felt like I was carrying a ghost in my pocket. A few days later, I did exactly that. Sold it, took the financial hit, and used part of the money to treat my climbing group to dinner. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Anna found an apartment 8 blocks away. She's still in the city, building her own life now, but it's no longer orbiting around mine. Her parents even sent me a thank you card, which was strange but oddly kind. And my neighbor Amy? She still makes dumplings for me and insists she'll find me someone nice and decisive. As for me, I'm focused on my work, my friends, and carving out a future that doesn't involve constant second-guessing. Because here's the truth I learned through all of this: love isn't about clinging to someone who can't decide if they want you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. Looking back, I realized this whole mess wasn't just about her indecision or my escape. It was about what happens when two people want different things, and how fear can destroy even the strongest bonds. She didn't lose me because she asked for space. She lost me because she only realized what she wanted after it was too late. And me? I didn't win by moving across the country, or by refusing to hear her out. What I gained was clarity. That loving someone doesn't mean waiting forever for them to decide if they love you back. That sometimes, protecting your own peace isn't selfish, it's survival. That I don't hate her. In some strange way, I even respect the fact that she's finally trying to change. But that doesn't mean I want to be part of her journey. We were a story that ended, and dragging it out any further would have only written more pain. So yes, I sold the ring. Yes, I let her go. And yes, I'm finally free. Because sometimes love doesn't end with a proposal, or a reunion, or some grand romantic gesture. Sometimes, the strongest ending is walking away, and never looking back.